Welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. In every episode, we explore how people from educators and artists to executives and entrepreneurs lead with authenticity, rise through adversity, and share the wisdom they've gained along the way. Today's guest is someone who has spent his career building what didn't exist before and doing it at extraordinary scale. Andy Ruben is a founder, CEO, board chair, and former C-suite executive at Walmart, where he helped shape everything from corporate strategy to sustainability to the company's earliest omnichannel innovations. He went on to pioneer branded resale through Patagonia's Worn Wear program, and today he's leading an AI company tackling one of retail's biggest challenges, returns fraud. But what stands out most about Andy is how he thinks about leadership, not as a title, but as a set of choices, relationships, and moments where you show up when it matters most. Andy, welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm so glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. What a kind introduction. Thank you.
Now, you started as a process engineer at Procter Gamble. What did that experience teach you about how systems and people work together?
Okay, when I think back now, so 30 some years ago, what I remember most about that experience was the people. There was somebody that I worked for, Doug, there was a plant manager, and the people at Procter and Gamble in the 90s, my memory was just exceptional people. The plant manager used to pull me aside at one point and talked about, unrelated to what I was doing, just talked to me about how to think about a career. And it was those kind of moments that, separate than people pulling me aside and helping me with, specific things I was working on. There were the moments where people would take time out of their day to just give me general advice. And I found their advice and their wisdom um, deep and useful. And I just wanted to spend more time with those people.
And you've also shared that you didn't initially want that particular job. What did it unlock for you that you couldn't have predicted at the time?
Oh my gosh. So coming into that job, no, I thought it was at the time that I took the job, my plan was I'd studied engineering in college amidst some turns into philosophy, photography, architecture, other things. And the last thing I thought I would do in the world would be business. Somehow at that point in my career, I thought that business was not good in the world and not needed. And that was not where I was going to spend my time. So when I got a job to work for Procter and Gamble, it just didn't fit what I planned on doing. And my grandpa had grown up in Ohio. My grandpa had grown up during the Depression in Cincinnati, Ohio. And when he found out, probably through my parents, that I had a job opportunity with Procter and Gamble, a company in Cincinnati through the Depression that he idolized, but I was going to pass the job opportunity up, I remember getting a call from him. And I don't think he ever said he would disown me, but that's how the call felt. And it stopped me pretty cold, almost from gosh, it's not that big of a deal. Why don't I just take the job? And I did. And what it unlocked for me coming into it, the thing I liked about engineering was problem solving. And that role in Procter and Gamble, yes, I was impressed by the people, but I was also, I feel like I felt another gear of depth when you solve for people. When you're solving inside systems, you're not just solving equations. And I found the same love of problem solving, but with a lot more complexity and nuance, because people are fascinating and strange and odd. And I think that puzzle is what really grabbed me. And so that was, from then on, I was in business the last 30 years.
And then you were working in consulting and you spent a decade consulting with Walmart before you joined the company. What did you see from the outside that others might have missed?
It was such an interesting time at Walmart, and it's really hard today when I talk to people about Walmart. It's hard for me, and I think it's really hard for other people to remember Walmart in the 90s. Sam Walton had won the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It was the Walmart was the American success story. It wasn't the behemoth company that we think of today. In fact, even into 2000, 99, 2000, Walmart was barely in the top 20 of Fortune 100s. And so the company, I think at one point I was working on strategy inside, from the outside as a consultant for Walmart. And at one point we came up with a make-believe cover of a magazine that talked about Walmart as Fortune 1. And to us, looking at the data, we found that to be inevitable. And the point was, prepare for this inevitable moment because at the growth rate, Walmart's going to be there in 4 to 5 years. And what would that mean for the company? And I remember I didn't think much of the cover because I took it for granted that everybody in the company would accept that premise. And we showed the cover to the first person. I remember the reaction was, "What is that? It's not going to happen." Right? And it was almost like the company had so grown up as a Southeastern retailer opening store by store, fighting for everything, right, against Kresge or Kmart, right? The Kmart was the behemoth, and Walmart was the kind of surprising challenger to big Kmart. And so when we showed that cover, from the outside, now we think of Walmart as this kind of global company, but at the time was very much a Southeastern retailer. And I remember the journey, from before I joined, when I decided to join, and then just after I joined, the company was not ready to be in the spotlight as a Fortune 1. And you just think about all the things that, I think it was 2 or 3 years between Walmart not being on the Fortune 10, let's say, and then within a few years being the Fortune 1. And at that point, it was the automotive giants. It was Ford, General Motors, Chrysler that were the big three, and they were untouchable in revenue. And then here Walmart comes, right, and just catapults to the top. But with that, in my early time there, comes a lot of expectation from society. And that's what the company was just unprepared for. And so when I joined, so I'd been on the outside. When I joined, it was, my friends were so excited when I got the role. Some of them were in disbelief. I'm sure some of them were jealous. Some of them were, my family was proud. They all knew of Walmart because they're from the Midwest and they shop there. But within 2 or 3 years, this was the thing that would like ruin a wedding for me because I'd go to a wedding and somebody would say, "We know you're with Walmart. Listen, if you don't talk about it, we won't talk about it. We're going to give you a pass for the weekend." Because Walmart had gone from kind of American success story very quickly overnight to becoming the kind of epitome of everything wrong with business and corporations. Jobs, supply chain, stores, labor, healthcare, benefits, all of that overnight. And so it was a time from the outside that I think is hard to almost remember what it was like in the 90s. And my excitement in joining was quickly replaced by my needing to defend this company that I chose to work at.
And how did you respond to that?
It took me a while to understand the right way to respond to the criticism, because at first my response was to confront it, right? And they were right or they were wrong. And I learned over time, the more criticism that came at me, that wasn't, it didn't even feel good because it didn't, none of it would work. The only thing that ended up working was to ask questions, right? To say, especially questions about what answers did people have? So not what problems could they identify or what was wrong, but what do they think should be done about it? And that was an interesting conversation. And so very quickly, my responses shifted from resistance, kind of head-on resistance, to openness and questioning what their plan was, what they thought should be happening, and who should do that, and get their thoughts. And maybe some of their thoughts would help me. Maybe there was a good idea.
Well, what was interesting is that you were also recruited in part because you could work across these different backgrounds and different perspectives. How do you build trust in environments based on that kind of diversity?
When I joined, so I joined to become the first head of strategy for Walmart, which is a role that strategy obviously has existed in a company that becomes the Fortune 1. Like, let's not kid ourselves. But there was no formalized role for strategy. So strategy existed in many places, and especially for a retailer at that time, a lot of it existed in real estate, where you put stores, the store formats, what those were. So when I joined and I was coming from the outside and I hadn't grown up in that environment, it was important to the CEO who I was working for, Lee Scott, that I think he quickly had me realize this was not going to be a bookshelf exercise. I couldn't make a deck, share the deck. We couldn't share the deck with the board and move on down the road. I was going to have to understand how this company worked. And there was a moment that I remember viscerally sitting in a room with Lee Scott and a number of his direct reports, where he started the conversation in a very casual way. And at some point was talking about where people went to school. And then he shifts to raise your hand if you went to a 4-year college. And I'm sitting with a bunch of CXXs and very few hands went up. Of course, I sheepishly raised my hand. And then he said, keep your hand up if you went to grad school. And I was the only hand still with my hand still up. And then he started going into, where did you go to grad school? Was it a good school? Was it, and it was clearly like the tone shifted. It went from like friendly banter to icy. And he was making a point, right? And he said, I think at one point, and this is a separate conversation, he said something like, aren't we all glad that Andy is here to solve all of our problems? We've been lost without strategy, and Andy's going to show up and help us. And so I think he was really pushing me, as I look back, to take stock of, that I was standing on big shoulders. I wasn't coming into something to fix something. I was coming in to understand what built this company and then to add whatever I could add toward a goal of what the company could do, right? If it was to reach its potential. And that's a very different understanding. And I spent a great deal of time traveling with operators to stores, you know, being at early breakfasts at Cracker Barrel, kind of just the way you build trust. You get to know people, you're curious, you ask a million questions. And every time you get an answer, it raises more questions. And you slowly, at least I gained an appreciation of everything that went into building the company, which didn't say the company had everything it needed moving forward, but it did give me a sense of where the company came from. And I think that the curiosity is what built the trust with people who would share things with me that then I would gain insight into how people would think and what things would move the needle, given the expectations for my role and where the company would go.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll dive into Andy's time at Walmart and the leadership lessons that shape the way he thinks today. Stay with us. Leadership isn't just about strategy, it's about people. The Forward Project helps organizations cultivate strong, adaptable leaders who create thriving workplace cultures. If you're ready to invest in your leadership team, visit www.theforwardproject.co to learn how. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and I'm here with Andy Ruben, founder, CEO, and a leader who has helped shape some of the most important shifts in modern retail. Now, Andy, you worked closely with Walmart CEO Lee Scott. What did you learn from him that still guides you today?
Probably maybe a day, but probably not 2 days goes by where he's not in my head in some way for something going on, right? In my world now, in a startup I'm working in now, in some kind of when times are when things come up, that there's not, his voice in my head in some way. And it just speaks to how much learning there was. The thing that I really appreciate looking back, one of the towering strengths he had was being able to motivate a group of people toward a direction. And it was a quality that I think I underappreciated early in my career. I kind of thought that if you had a good strategy, you had a good idea, you would share the idea, the best ideas win, and you move on down the road. What I underestimated was what it takes for a leader to galvanize a group of people in a small company. I mean, my company's 6 people right now. 6 people in Walmart, it could be, 2 million people. But it's the number of people and how you align their hearts and their minds to move a direction. And you can have the best strategies in the world, but if you can't get a leadership team to align around those, you're not really moving the needle. And I think that is not, it's not I've never seen it as a calculated process that you step back and figure out the breadcrumbs that will get you there. I think it's something that I think obviously it's more complex than that, but I think it's a learning process. I think you are sharing ideas for the good of something bigger than yourself, and you are being observant and listening to what comes back. And you are addressing those as part of how you evolve. And I'm going to share a quick example of this to make any sense of what I'm saying. There was a speech that Lee Scott gave called 21st Century Leadership that was early in the sustainability journey, maybe 9 months in. So Walmart had started down the sustainability track, environmental sustainability, and about 9 months in, Lee had clearly seen enough and the company had seen enough to say, this is a big deal. Katrina had happened, let's say 2 months or so before this speech. And so after Katrina, Lee decided that environmental sustainability would lead towards something bigger. But if that was going to be the case, it wasn't going to be a half step. He was going to take the full step there, and he was going to kind of put a line in the sand for what the company would ultimately do and take on. So he wrote what would be a speech given in the home office, Walmart home office auditorium in front of Walmart associates. And several times we'd go to Lee's direct report meeting. So 5 or 6 people in this conference room Walmart had called the Quail Room, because Mr. Sam was a big hunter. And this was like the primary conference room, not big, kind of battleship gray walls, just a conference table and some chairs. And Lee would have me pass out the speech to Lee's directs. And I would sit kind of behind this table, and Lee would let people read the speech and then would look at him and say, what do you all think? And he'd get reactions. And my job was to take notes on the reactions and then follow up with people after that meeting. And we went through this 5 or 6 times. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it was 2 or 3 times. But it was a process, right? It wasn't that he said, here's where we're going, get in line. And what he was doing was both understanding how his direct reports thought about these new topics. So he was constantly gaining knowledge on people. And then he was also advancing an idea that he believed in while he iterated and evolved the idea itself. And the speech was a way to watch that, literally watch it. But back to his towering strength, I mean, I think it shows real leadership to evolve how you're going to move a group of people up a mountain by sharing something with them and listening and adapting your own thoughts for what is going to be, your own direction of what is right.
Can you tell the story about the Eat What You Cook field trips and what they revealed about leadership?
There were a few things in sustainability that really allowed a company to change how it saw itself, right? Not just change what it did or do a report, but like when someone says, what's the company stand for? How do you evolve how a group of people sees itself? And then therefore in the ways that it works with other people, how other people would see the company. And you can have all the science in the world, but it's no substitute for kind of emotion and humanness. And so early on, we decided that the top 30 or so executives in the company wouldn't just learn about environmental principles, they'd go experience them in the world. And we named these field trips, right? They'd be 24-hour, 30-hour field trips. And they would be outside the office. And we named them Eat What You Cooks because there was a merchandising term where the buyer of toys would go work in the toy department for a week, right? And they were called Eat What You Cook. So we adapted a lot of language to signal what things were from language that people knew. What's amazing about this now, if you talk about Eat What You Cook's in Walmart, they don't mean the merchandising, they mean the environmental trips. So I think in adapting the language, they've evolved to become these things. But so we take John Menzer, for example, who is running international. We went on a river rafting trip in the Bitterroot in Montana with Jared Diamond and a person, her name was Jenny, but she had been waging a 2-year campaign in Hamilton, Montana to stop a Walmart from opening. And, so we'd bring these people together and we'd have these trips. The COO of Walmart stores would go down to look at the mangroves. Doug McMillan, who then became CEO after, went to Fishkill, I believe it's Fishkill, New York, to see the largest landfill. And what would happen is you'd have a Walmart executive and some of their leaders that were now out in the field interacting with people and seeing things. And then you're all together for dinner that night and you're talking about what you've just seen. And the last part of the Eat What You Cooks is when you came back to Bentonville. There was a Friday morning meeting that was kind of the officers of the company, and you'd simply share what you'd experienced. So I remember Mike Duke coming back at one point from being in the Arctic Circle with ICCP scientists. And Mike shared this comment around, if his daughter is sick, I can't remember the exact numbers, but if 95 out of 100 doctors say the following is going to be what will make your daughter better, he's no longer going to debate whether that is the right course of action. And he was talking about his own journey in climate change, right? And so that was, but all of a sudden, that if you're listening to that story, you're feeling his own personal journey. You're no longer seeing a slide or a textbook or a scientist talk to you. And that is very different. And I think it was a large part of how sustainability really got embedded into the culture as opposed to became a thing to go do.
Let's take a quick break. And when we return, we'll talk about Andy's transition out of Walmart and what it takes to build something entirely new. Don't go anywhere. Are you looking to connect with an audience passionate about leadership, growth, and success? Become a sponsor of Expressions of Leadership and align your brand with inspiring conversations that make an impact. Contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com to explore sponsorship opportunities. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, joined by Andy Ruben, whose leadership journey spans corporate transformation and entrepreneurial innovation. Now, Andy, at one point you left Walmart. What was it that prompted that departure?
I had had 4 roles at Walmart, 3 of which I felt really good about. The last, I just didn't feel success in being able to help the company. My last role was around omnichannel and how Walmart would compete in this, evolving landscape that was more customer centric, more e-commerce, where stores were part of the system, but the end point wasn't a store. The end point was, increasingly whether you ordered it on your phone or a desktop, right? Getting an item. You could get it at a store. You could get it online, but it was a changing landscape. So I think that last role was just one that I wasn't successful in the way that I feel like I had really contributed in the same ways in my other roles. And the environment, I didn't feel like I was making much progress in the environment nor learning as much as I had in my other roles. And so I think a combination between that and my desire to really try something on my own. The startup environment was having kind of a second round. I think it had been pretty frothy in the late 90s into the dot-com bust, kind of boom and bust. And I had missed that. I had sat that out. I stayed in my consulting world during that time and then had spent a decade at Walmart. And so it was happening again, and I didn't want to miss it again. So I think it was more nuanced than that. I was able to leave Walmart at the moment. I felt like a fine time, and I really wanted to try something on my own.
And you went on to pioneer branded resale with Patagonia as a worn wear sustainability program and retail platform. What did you see before the rest of the market caught on?
Like most things, that was not visible when I left. So at first, when I left the company, I had started a different company with two co-founders, and that first company was called Yurtle, and that first company was a peer-to-peer exchange that was, our one of the sayings was sharing is the new shopping, and the idea is that you would exchange items with other people. It was kind of in the same timing as the Real and ThreadUp and different marketplaces that were starting up. And honestly, we I think it was an incredible community organization. It was not an incredible venture funded startup. And so while it had a million plus active members a month, it wasn't unsuccessful, but it wasn't going to accomplish what I and others were seeing, which was it was crazy. I had a young daughter at the time. It was crazy to buy a new pair of shin guards for soccer in the fall when all the older kids on the field 1 year older had just gotten rid of their shin guards. And so it was just example after example where I just couldn't believe the insanity that the best thing to do is go out and buy a new pair of shin guards. And that would precipitate all the activities upstream of the plastics and the resins and the oil and the movement. And when you could save a lot of money by just using the shin guards that were now sitting idle in someone's garage. But I had had a belief for a while that there was a better way to solve my daughter playing soccer and having the equipment she needed, which wasn't to go out and to produce new shin guards, and it was to get them out of the existing world because plenty of shin guards existed. And there's a stat that we now, I think it's from the British Fashion Council, that if we stop producing clothing right now, we'd have enough clothing on the planet for the next 6 generations. And so we've just gone from this world where scale production created access to things that allowed us to play soccer and, feel fashionable, to being overrun by the volume of that and not necessarily as customer centric, right? Because we would much rather save money on these things and have more options. So all of that led to a realization that one of the things we want when we buy used items was a high sense of trust. And that the breakthrough in the beginning of Warrenware was, what if you could get the existing Patagonia Nano Puff from Patagonia? And you'd have all the trust of Patagonia. You'd have 2 days shipping. It would show up in the same packaging. If you didn't like it, you'd walk it back in, you'd return it just like Patagonia. If it fell apart, you bring it back to a store just like Patagonia. Patagonia knows everything about the item, so when you search for it, you could research the best items. And in fact, one day you could just shop for the right jacket and you could see all the options from Patagonia, new and used. And I was pretty convinced early on that that would happen. When I started Yurtle, I thought that the way we'd do that would be a new type of retailer that would make those options explicit with new and used. What I realized is that the path was going to be more straightforward with brands like Patagonia and Lululemon and REI and Levi's to just allow the brands that already occupied the space in our minds to sell both new and used. And I thought as a business, as an entrepreneur, I'd be able to raise money and scale because money, having a viable business model in my mind is what allows you to scale and do big things. So I wanted to tap into that. And I thought that if we could be if we were making pickaxe and shovels during the gold rush, this was going to happen because the Patagonias and Lululemons of the world would now need to compete with the ThreadUps and the eBays and everybody else as younger generations started to appreciate used as a smarter way to shop. And so we would simply provide the pickaxe and shovels of this new reality. And I do recall the first time that I saw the Patagonia designers get a hold of the very first version of the Wornwear site. Because of course, like me and the early people in Patagonia, we'd messed it up, and the designers got a hold of it and basically said, "Give me that. Let me do this right." And I remember the first time I saw it and got to click on a jacket for half the cost of what a new jacket was, but be able to buy it from Patagonia. And right there it said, by the way, when you do this, you are saving X% of the footprint because all of these activities don't need to happen. And then, we would move into where the jacket came from and the story and who had worn the jacket. And it was this beautiful expression of producing high quality items and craft and getting to move those around between people that would allow more people to have nicer jackets and fewer jackets in the world. And so that was remember exactly where I was sitting, and I called up Nellie Cohn, who's my counterpart inside Patagonia, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Nellie, this is it. It's it. This is it. It didn't quite go like that, but it's definitely, Trove. So that company became Trove. Trove is now working with 100+ brands. Trove still occupies 70% of all the technology behind these brands. Everybody from, Carhartt to luggage companies being able to buy back and resell their own items on their platforms. So I am very proud of that. It has not moved at the pace and scale I was going for yet.
And when you're building something new, how does your leadership approach need to evolve?
Um, I'm going to comment on when things aren't going well because I think those are the times that require the most. I think you can really, for me, they're the darkest moments. And they're not dark like, because I don't know how to say it. They're not dark like fun dark, like, oh, it's a dark moment. So cool, I'm going to learn from it. They can be really dark, where you question, for me at least, you question not just like, can you do it? Are you any good at all? Have you led a group of people totally astray? Like, have you let down all the people who've put money in you and come to join you and left good jobs? And you've convinced so many people to do so many things because you believe in something, but maybe you were wrong maybe you were a charlatan from day one. Those are very dark moments. And I think one phrase that I love this phrase, I can't remember who shared it with me, but never waste a good crisis. There is not a single crisis that I've seen that doesn't have some upside somewhere. Now, the silver lining can be very small. And again, we're talking about business here. So I think we're keep it in perspective. We're not talking about cancer and health and, societal ills. But never waste a good crisis. I mean, there is always something that comes out of something that you wouldn't choose to have happened, right? It could be a pivot. It could be a new revenue model. It could be a dozen things. You never know what they're going to be. In startups, for me, leadership, the game Whack-A-Mole where you're sitting there. I've probably only maybe I've never played. I think I played it once maybe. But your job is to like take that mallet and like the moles pop up and you got to whack them back down. I always feel like as a leader in a startup that is moving quickly, your job, because you've got moles popping up everywhere, and your job is to hit those suckers down so far beneath the table that they don't pop up very quickly again. So I've always felt like leadership in this environment requires solving things in ways they don't pop back up in 5 days or a week. Because if they do, you're going to have 10 new problems. And you can't possibly get all those new moles with a mallet if the old ones are also popping back up. So I think it's a constant, that the leadership role in a small company is whatever needs doing, managing crises, keeping people aligned and engaged, holding on to a vision. I think the explaining of the narrative that is always shifting constantly becomes more important. Checking in with people. What are they looking to do? Are they how like they're small babies and they're very fragile. And so I think the care and attentiveness that they require is more nuanced and is requires a vigilance.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll further explore Andy's leadership philosophy and hear about his new venture, Clarity. Don't go anywhere. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and today's conversation with Andy Ruben is all about seeing and shaping the future. Andy, how do you help others stay aligned when the path isn't necessarily clear?
For me, at least, part of the curiosity that I have is being able to see um, whatever I've been able to see so far and make sense of it. How does it fit in? Where's it going? Where's it leading to? What happens next? Which allows me to spend a lot of time checking in because I think it's not like it. I kind of picture in my mind sailing as an activity that comes into my mind sometimes where uh, the journey and the kind of charting the course is more about having a point on the horizon than it is knowing the path of how to get there. And depending on how the winds change, you might, I don't know the sailing, I'm not a sailing person, but like you might trim your sails and, cut different directions multiple times. And you can't know that, but you can pick a point on the horizon. And what I like about picking a point on the horizon is it becomes a point of view. And it's that point of view that you can help align people around. But the point of view should never, in my mind, part of the value of the point of view is it can change, but it doesn't change willy-nilly. It changes because you and the team and the people you work with and people outside expose you to new things. And you're always working on, from what you know right now, the reality, what is the best possible point we're sailing toward, the blue house all the way on the other shore. And so it's the blue house, and here's the blue house, and we're moving there. And everyone's, if they're not aligned, why? What do they know? Because maybe what they're going to say says, should be the radio tower just next to the blue house. We're 5 degrees off, right? And that makes us better. But I feel like I'm constantly working on helping a group of people, learning myself and seeing what that point is on that horizon.
And one of your principles is focusing on what's within your control. How has that guided you in high stakes moments?
When you're trying to get something to happen, like in a positive sense, if I'm trying to create more market traction, let's say for Trove or Clarity right now, what I can't control is how fast I can get a large enterprise like a retailer to make a decision on piloting with Clarity. There's a rule that the number of people inside a company that needs to be, has the ability to say no. For every additional person who can say no to a decision like Clarity, you elongate the decision process by a certain amount, right? And it's like an exponential law, the number of people who can say no. And so it might take a large retailer 6 months to get through that process. That is not in my control. No matter how much I want it to take a month, there are a lot of hoops to get through with a big company, and there's a reason for that. What is in my control is how many companies I am working with. If I need to land 3 companies, it just means that I need to be speaking to more companies, right? And so that is within my control. And so I think always there's a step of what do you need to have happen? What are you trying to change in the world? And where's our locus of control, or where is our agency in those things? And not being upset by the things that aren't in our control, but feeling the power in the things that are and leveraging those.
And now I'd like to shift to your newest venture. Your current company, Clarity, uses AI to tackle return fraud. Can you tell us how this idea came about?
I feel like I spent 10 years in Trove as a customer. So the number of times I would watch a box show back up to the warehouse full of rocks, or watch an associate stare at the leather on a Gucci bag trying to figure out if it was a knockoff or not. My friends in the industry who had, lost tens of millions of dollars on fake AirPods and iPhones. And so when I heard about the technology that would look at something, AirPods are very difficult to assess if they're real or not. Because there's just there are no visible ways that you can do a really nice replica of an AirPod, and it can even connect to a phone and sound okay, but not be a true Apple AirPod. And so when I saw the technology that can not just see the outside of the case, but can, without ever opening a box, see inside the chipset and know that this is an authentic AirPod, and it can do that in 1 to 2 seconds, as opposed to the 6 to 7 minutes I was used to watching someone inspect the AirPods to try to figure out if they were real. So, one, not getting to the best decision. Two, making a return line very long, right? And taking up a lot of labor and time. And I'd much rather, having worked for a summer in the returns counter in a retailer, my job is like, I just want to take care of the people in line. If I could do that in 2 seconds by saying, here's your refund. And the thing that bothers me about this space is that the very small percentage of customers that are stealing from retail, right, that are going to incredible lengths. We just discovered in the first day we were using this machine on Apple products, we found 12 fake products. Three of the fake products were in factory sealed boxes. So someone stealing from this company we were processing these returns for had gotten a hold of Apple legitimate packaging, or had ripped off the packaging in a way that it couldn't be discernible. Those small number of customers, they affect us all, because then what retailers have to do is they lock down return policies, and we basically make retailers make a choice today between serving the good customers, the majority of customers who are just trying to have AirPods, and the retailer wants to sell and give you the ability to return them. We make all of those customers suffer for the few people who decide they're going to steal from the retailer. And so when I saw a device that could, in 1 to 2 seconds, just say hot dog, no hot dog, just made sense. Now building it, I mean, takes time, improving it, and step by step, it is a startup. But the potential is there. The industry's massive. Retailers lose $150 billion every year to fraud like those fake AirPods, which is insane. So we're going to stop that.
This also goes back to your sustainability roots in the sense that when you can't return these products that could then be recycled out, they often will just go to the bin.
Oh, it's nuts. Yeah. If you've ever seen a modern retailer's return center, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, whatever you are picturing in your mind right now is way more stomach dropping than you're likely imagining, the amount of waste. And it's because retail has grown so quickly, where the returns are just like a dark corner. And increasingly, as returns have grown, so returns are growing at, that fraud number I mentioned is growing at 18% a year right now. So because returns have skyrocketed, that's where the fraud is. And so these aren't things that retail has grown up with the tools to solve, which is where the opportunity is.
There's such a strong through line in your work, whether it's sustainability, resale, or AI. And it's about real problem solving in a way that creates value for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that's what, all the way back to Procter and Gamble, one of my ahas about business, and I think it stayed through the day, has just been the thing I love about business is a construct, a system, a kind of a complex system to allow people to get together to see a problem that hasn't been solved and to say, hey, if we can solve this problem and it's worth a certain amount to someone else, has a certain value to someone else, we'll keep a small part of the value of solving that problem so long as we can solve it. And that allows all kinds of progress to be made. I'm not someone who believes the world should be business. I think that would be actually, I think it would be a horrible world to live in, is capitalism. But I think capitalism as a construct uh, is incredibly powerful at creating change. in combination with society and other constructs that are very necessary.
Let's take one final break. And when we return, we'll look ahead to Andy's vision for the future and the legacy he wants to leave, and close with some wisdom and whimsy. Don't miss a thing. Follow Expressions of Leadership on your favorite podcast app and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, here with Andy Ruben as we move into the final part of our conversation. Now, Andy, when you look ahead, what do you see as the next major shift in retail and technology?
Boy, I feel like living in the Bay Area, if I don't say something AI related right now, I'm going to get a fine in the mail. Um, it almost feels trite to say that. But it is like it is. I'm a little obsessive about it right now. The way that, but maybe we can be more, maybe more interesting would be to talk about the way that it affects retail, right? And all of us. My excitement for what is changing right now in retail has been kind of with the advent of large language models, is that there is this, there are things that I've talked about in commerce for the last 30 years. At the beginning of Walmart.com, we actually questioned if there was like what the role of a retailer was, moving into omnichannel, in doing strategy early on in my career for Walmart. Like what was it about the value that was being added from a retailer perspective to a customer? And right now, retail is fairly generic in that things are offered to all of us. And the excitement I have on what's happening right now is the context of which we can find the things that would best serve our particular individual needs right now in our current context. So, silly example, but if I'm looking for a bike helmet for my daughter, I don't want to start on Walmart or Amazon or the local bike store and start trying to figure out what gets the Virginia Tech safety ratings and what's most comfortable and what gets 5 stars from the consumer and what do people like wearing for this type of biking. And I'm just me. In fact, if I'm more extreme about it, sometimes I'm a medium in a shirt, sometimes I'm a small, but I'm not. I'm just me. I've got dimensions. And so there's so much of the world right now that has been, we've done the best we can, but we essentially, what we do is we force customers to go to big pages of a bunch of tiles online or like a bunch of items on a shelf and try to figure out what the best item is for them. And we all have friends who do incredible amounts of research before buying things, and we go to those friends and we say, "Hey, what's the best so and so?" But this is the ability to do that without needing to go to those friends because it can come to us. And instead of having a sea of products come to us, we can end up with the one or two products that really fit the best overall bike helmet. And what I like about this future is that it won't just be the one of the best bike helmets. The fact of what I'm looking for that bike helmet will have a feedback mechanism back to the people who sell bike helmets and back to people who design and make bike helmets. And what I expect is in this world, while I think it's going to be incredibly disruptive for retail for a bunch of reasons, it will lead to us finding products that are better products for the things we're trying to do in life. I've never bought a bike helmet to help someone's profit and loss statement at a retailer. I buy a bike helmet because I want to be safe when I'm on a bike. And so we get things, it's not personal. We buy things because they solve something, they allow us to do things in the world. And so as we are able to better match the things that do those things will also evolve and we will get more tailored products to individual needs. The products will get better, they will get more affordable. Retailers will be better, they'll add more value. We will all get better. The process of that is going to be massively tumultuous with the music is going to stop. There aren't enough chairs for the retailers today. I mean, there's a lot that is going to happen in getting there, but I'm very bullish on the outcome for retail right now.
And when you look back on your career, what kind of legacy do you want to leave, both in terms of the businesses that you've built and the people that you've impacted?
There are people in my mind, some of which we've talked about, that have that come up in my mind quite a bit. And what I really at this moment and kind of in this time, right, what I really want to be able to do is I want to be able to be that person for more people. There's an incredible startup community because if you're part of the club, you're part of the club, and you don't become part of the club by making it as a startup founder. You become part of the club by doing it, right? And so if you put everything on the line and gone for it, in my view, you're in. And if anyone's done that, like I'm down to help them in any way I can with anything I've learned. And then the beauty of being a founder is you get to ignore whatever you want because you get to live and die by whatever you choose. So I want to be able to play that role for more people as it's useful. I want to see more. I would love to be able to play a role where I can help more startups not waste as much time, but be more successful in what they're doing. More students graduate with a slightly more nuanced perspective on something that might not have come to them to do more of what they want to do. Retailers be more successful, brands be more successful. I'm enjoying that work and I'm finding it in the leadership inside my current company, but I'm also finding it in board roles, in advisory, in teaching. Like I'm finding more of that in life right now, and I love that.
Well, Andy, where can people learn more about you or follow your work?
I mean, online is online. It's, I mean, you can find us at claritysystems.ai. You can find me at andyruben.com. There's plenty out there. So plenty out there. And if you are starting something and it's related to commerce and retail and I can help, find me on LinkedIn. Uh, yeah, if I can help, let me know. And if I can, I'll do my best too.
And now it's time for the wisdom and whimsy segment of the show, where I get to ask the guest one advice question and one fun question. Starting with the advice question, Andy, if someone wants to build something that doesn't exist yet, where should they start, especially when they don't have all the answers?
I would always recommend starting in the tension between what you see that should exist and why it doesn't exist. So, for example, if back to the shin guard, if I should not be buying a new pair of shin guards from Amazon, but they should be showing up in 2 days from the house three doors down, why don't I do that now? Like, what's stopping me? And you quickly start getting to, it's kind of the five whys. You quickly start getting to, okay, well, if that was different, okay, so let's say that's different. Would that change it? Would that change it? And like at some point you have to go build things because you would never stop with the questions and the curiosity, like it's endless. And I think it always stems for me from a point of view of I really believe that the world we live in can be we don't I'm not happy with the world as it is today. I think the world can be better in so many ways, and we've got agency and ability to make it so. And so if that's the case, um, the hard part isn't, I mean, I think the hard part's agreeing what is better, but it's also in figuring out why it's not that way and doing the real work to solve those things that allow it to be that way. And when you really do that, you look back and it is more that way. And that's what gives me energy.
And now for the fun question. I know you play the guitar and you're currently taking singing lessons. What's your go-to song right now that you love playing or singing, and why?
Okay, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit. This is a song that I would not try to sing nor play, but I've recently I it's one that okay, it's a whiter shade of pale, but it's Steve Winwood on vocals and Santana on guitar. And it's what it's like there's something from that song as I listen to it that is so deeply connected that moves me. And it's a combination of Steve Winwood's an incredible vocalist. Santana's an incredible guitar player. But the two of them are playing together. And you almost, what I feel like when I experience the song is that you feel them together in their play as you hear the song. And it's like we get to look in and experience what they're actually doing and living. And I think it's one of the incredible things about music. Music can have me feel things that I can't feel any other way. And that's one of those songs that I think we just get visibility into something that no matter what's going on, I think a lot of people listen to music to help alter like what they're doing, thinking, feeling. Once I hear that song, I kind of ground myself, right? And I come back to the things that are really beautiful around us.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for being here on Expressions of Leadership and for your thoughtfulness, your candor, and the way that you've shown that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to learn, to adapt, and to step into the unknown with intention.
Oh my gosh, thank you. How much fun.
And to our listeners, if this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to follow and subscribe to Expressions of Leadership wherever you listen to podcasts, and share this episode with someone who might find it meaningful. You can also connect with us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Until next time, I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, inviting you to reflect on how you show up, how you lead, and the impact you create in the world around you. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins.